The tycoon offered her a fake promotion as a trap. The waitress revealed the loophole he never saw. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Imagine working in a bustling restaurant, where every day feels like a race against time. The plates are constantly full, the orders are piling up, and the clock never seems to slow down. In the middle of this chaotic world, there's a young waitress, working hard every day, trying to make ends meet. Her name is Emily. Emily has been working at this upscale restaurant for over a year. She was diligent, friendly, and always going above and beyond to ensure every guest was satisfied. But despite her efforts, her boss, the owner of the restaurant, a wealthy and powerful tycoon named Richard, had never shown much interest in her progress. He was the kind of person who only noticed people when they were either making him money or causing him trouble. Emily's life was a routine of early mornings and late nights, struggling with the reality that no matter how much effort she put in, her dreams of a promotion seemed far out of reach. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Richard called Emily into his office. He sat behind his large, polished desk, his fingers tapping lightly on the wooden surface. His eyes were cold, but there was something in his expression that intrigued her. He smiled and told her that he had noticed her hard work and was considering offering her a promotion. Emily was taken aback. Could this really be happening? A promotion? After all this time? Richard went on, speaking with the smoothness of someone who had mastered the art of persuasion. He said that there was an opening for a management position in the restaurant, and he thought Emily was the perfect candidate. But there was one condition. She would need to prove her dedication by completing a series of tasks he would set for her. These tasks, he claimed, would help her demonstrate her leadership potential. The catch was subtle but clear. These tasks would be grueling and, as Emily would soon discover, nearly impossible to complete. Emily, though cautious, was willing to take the risk. She saw this as her big break, the opportunity she had been waiting for. Little did she know, this was not a chance for advancement at all. It was a trap designed to test her loyalty, but Richard never imagined that Emily would uncover the loophole he had never noticed. What was about to unfold would change everything, not just for Emily, but for Richard as well. As the days passed after Richard's offer, Emily began to throw herself into the tasks he assigned her. She was determined to prove herself, to show that she could rise above the endless grind and finally earn the recognition she had been craving for so long. But the more she worked, the more she began to notice something strange. Richard's instructions, at first seemingly reasonable, became increasingly vague and convoluted. One day, he asked her to organize a massive event for the restaurant, an upscale gathering for potential clients and investors. Emily, with no prior experience in event planning, found herself overwhelmed. But she didn't hesitate. She threw herself into the project with all her energy, working overtime, making calls, and coordinating every detail. Yet, when the event finally arrived, Richard wasn't there. He had promised to oversee everything but failed to show up, leaving Emily to deal with every last-minute issue that arose. The event was a success, but it drained her, and Richard barely acknowledged her efforts. This wasn't the first time he had made promises and then disappeared. Emily began to realize that this wasn't a promotion she was being offered, but rather a test that Richard had no intention of letting her pass. Slowly but surely, she started connecting the dots. The tasks he gave her were not designed to help her grow or show her leadership skills, but to break her down and prove her loyalty. The more she succeeded in these tasks, the more he would increase the difficulty. It was clear now, this was not a genuine opportunity, but a trap. Richard had been playing a game all along, and she was the pawn. Emily spent sleepless nights, trying to figure out how to escape this vicious cycle. She had become a prisoner in her own ambition. As the days turned into weeks, the tasks kept coming, each one more demanding than the last. She found herself working long hours, dealing with difficult customers, and cleaning up after the event that no one else seemed to care about. Meanwhile, Richard sat in his office, appearing for only a few minutes here and there, his cold smile a constant reminder of how far apart they truly were. Then, something changed. One evening, while reviewing some documents, Emily stumbled upon a memo that had been left on Richard's desk. It was a note that seemed like it had been carelessly discarded, but something about it caught her eye. It was a message to another employee, discussing a new plan for the restaurant. As she read further, she realized that Richard was planning to hire a new manager, someone who had no ties to the restaurant and could be molded to his exact specifications. The memo mentioned nothing about Emily or her progress. It was clear now, Richard had never intended to give her the promotion. This was all a test to see how far she would go to prove her loyalty. The revelation hit Emily like a ton of bricks. She had been played, and worse, she had been completely blind to it. But Emily wasn't the type to let herself be defeated. If Richard thought he could manipulate her into submission, he was wrong. She wasn't going to let him get away with this. In the days that followed, Emily began to quietly gather information. She started paying attention to the little details that Richard had overlooked, the loopholes in his plans, the inconsistencies in his promises, and the people who were just as trapped as she was. She knew that exposing Richard's deception wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to find a way. She had to outsmart him, and she was beginning to realize that the key to doing that was not in trying to meet his impossible expectations, but in using his own game against him. She had to find the loophole he had never seen. And that's exactly what she planned to do. Emily wasn't just going to expose Richard's lies. She was going to turn the tables on him, in a way that would leave him no room to escape. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since she'd started working at the restaurant, Emily felt a sense of hope. She had found the strength to fight back, and she was determined to win. Emily spent the next few days obsessively reviewing the memo she had found. It had been a careless mistake on Richard's part, but Emily knew it was the key to understanding his true intentions. The memo clearly indicated that he was looking to hire a new manager, someone without any history or personal connection to the restaurant, someone who could be molded into his ideal employee. The more she read over the note, the more it became clear that Richard had never even considered her for the promotion. It was all part of his game, a trap designed to see how much she would endure before quitting or, even worse, resigning herself to the idea of being stuck in her current position. But Emily wasn't the type to back down. She knew she had to act fast. The first thing she did was gather every bit of evidence she could. She started by taking screenshots of the memo and other related documents she had discovered on Richard's desk. She even started documenting the hours she worked, keeping track of the extra shifts and the unreasonable demands Richard kept placing on her. She was meticulous. Every phone call, every email, every conversation was logged. She made sure she had a detailed record of all the tasks Richard had given her and the results he had promised, promises he had never followed through on. Emily knew this wasn't just about proving her own worth. It was about exposing Richard for the manipulative, dishonest person he truly was. But as she gathered her evidence, she realized that she needed more than just documents. She needed allies. The problem was that everyone at the restaurant was either too afraid of Richard to speak up or too busy with their own work to care. The thought of standing up to him seemed impossible. Richard had a reputation. He was wealthy, powerful, and well-connected in the industry. He could easily destroy anyone who crossed him, and most of the staff were too dependent on their jobs to risk their livelihoods. But Emily wasn't intimidated. She knew she had one advantage: Richard's arrogance. He believed he was invincible, that no one would ever challenge him. He had underestimated her from the start. Emily decided it was time to put her plan into motion. She started by talking to a few trusted colleagues, people she knew wouldn't judge her for questioning Richard's methods. Slowly, she gathered a small group of employees who were also fed up with the way Richard ran the restaurant. They had all been mistreated in one way or another, and now they were ready to fight back. Emily knew that with their help, she could gather the final pieces of the puzzle. They could provide eyewitness accounts of Richard's mistreatment, and they could testify to the fact that his promises were nothing more than empty words. The next step was to gather the courage to confront him. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that if she didn't take action now, Richard would continue to manipulate her, and everyone else, without consequence. She spent the next few days preparing herself for the confrontation. She went over the evidence, rehearsed what she would say, and reminded herself that she had nothing to lose. She was done playing Richard's game. One afternoon, Emily walked into Richard's office, her heart pounding in her chest. She had already warned the others that she was about to confront him, and they were all waiting to see what would happen. As she entered the office, Richard looked up from his desk, his cold smile spreading across his face. He thought she was coming to thank him for the opportunity. He didn't know that this meeting would be the last time he would ever try to manipulate her. Emily calmly placed the pile of evidence on his desk. She pointed out the inconsistencies in his promises, the loopholes in his plan, and how he had been using her to test her loyalty without any intention of giving her a promotion. Richard's smile faltered, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was used to being in control, to having people fear him. But now, the tables had turned. Emily wasn't the vulnerable, overworked employee anymore. She was the one in control. She finished her statement by telling Richard that she was done working for someone who didn't respect her, and that she was going to expose him for the fraud he truly was. Richard, realizing he had underestimated her, tried to backpedal. He told her she was overreacting, that she was just being emotional, but Emily wasn't fooled. She had seen enough to know that Richard was the one who was afraid. He had no idea how far Emily was willing to go to bring him down. She walked out of his office that day with her head held high, knowing that she had taken the first step toward turning the tables. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. Richard wasn't going to go down without a fight, and Emily had to be ready for whatever came next. The days following Emily's confrontation with Richard were filled with a sense of anticipation and unease. She knew that the battle wasn't over, far from it. Richard wasn't the type to back down easily, and now that he had been cornered, she could expect him to retaliate. But Emily was ready. She had taken the first step, and she wasn't going to let fear hold her back. Over the next week, she continued to quietly gather her evidence, meticulously building her case against Richard. She contacted a few former employees who had worked under him and who had left the restaurant due to his mistreatment. They had left on bad terms, and they were eager to share their experiences. Slowly, Emily pieced together a damning portrait of Richard's manipulative behavior, not just toward her, but toward everyone who had worked for him. She spoke to a few more of her colleagues, gaining their trust, and soon, she had a small network of people who were all willing to stand by her and tell the truth about what had been going on behind the scenes. They had all been afraid of Richard's power, but now they realized that the only way to change things was to stand up to him together. Emily's plan began to take shape. She knew that going public with her story would be the key to exposing Richard's true nature, but she also knew it had to be done carefully. If she went to the authorities or the media without proper evidence, Richard would easily discredit her. It had to be foolproof. With her evidence in hand, Emily decided to go to the board of directors of the restaurant. They were the ones who held the real power, not Richard. They were the ones who could make a decision to remove him from his position if they saw the truth. She wasn't going to let him control her any longer. The day she walked into the boardroom, Emily felt a surge of confidence. She had rehearsed everything, every detail. She wasn't going to allow herself to be intimidated again. Richard might have been able to manipulate her, but he had underestimated the strength she had within her. She walked into the room and was greeted by the cold stares of the board members. Richard, who had no idea Emily was about to confront the board, was sitting at the head of the table. He looked at her with a smug smile, as though he had already won. But Emily wasn't afraid. She began to lay out the evidence she had gathered, starting with the memo she had found on Richard's desk. She showed them how he had never intended to promote her, that he had used her as a pawn in a game to see how far she would go. She presented testimony from former employees who described the toxic environment Richard had created. She revealed the countless lies and broken promises, all designed to break her spirit and keep her under his control. As she spoke, the room grew quieter. The board members, who had once been so easily manipulated by Richard's charm and power, were now starting to listen. Emily's voice was steady, filled with the confidence that came from knowing she was speaking the truth. Richard's expression started to change. His smug smile faded, and a flicker of panic appeared in his eyes. He tried to interject, to discredit Emily's claims, but she wasn't done. She had saved the best for last. She pulled out the most damning piece of evidence, an email she had found in Richard's inbox that confirmed his plan to hire a new manager, someone with no history in the restaurant, someone who was meant to be molded into his perfect employee. She showed them how Richard had planned to keep her in the dark, while he secretly plotted to replace her. The room was silent. Richard, once the powerful and untouchable owner of the restaurant, was now the one on the defensive. The board members exchanged looks, clearly shocked by what they had just heard. It was clear to everyone in the room that Richard had been lying, manipulating, and using people for his own gain. Emily had turned the tables, but Richard wasn't going to give up without a fight. He tried to defend himself, claiming that Emily was just disgruntled, that she was seeking revenge because she hadn't been given the promotion she wanted. But his excuses were falling on deaf ears. The board members could see through his lies. They had finally realized that the person they had trusted to run the restaurant had been abusing his power all along. After a tense silence, one of the board members spoke up, saying that Richard's actions had left them no choice but to remove him from his position as owner. The decision was unanimous. Richard was fired, and Emily's journey from victim to victor was complete. But the battle had taken its toll on her. Emily had won, but she had also lost a part of herself in the process. The constant stress, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, it had all been a heavy burden. Yet, as she walked out of the boardroom, the weight lifted from her shoulders. She was free. Richard's empire had crumbled, and she had brought it down. Emily knew that her fight wasn't just about exposing Richard. It was about standing up for herself and for everyone who had been hurt by his actions. And now, the future was hers to build. In the aftermath of Richard's removal, Emily felt a mix of triumph and exhaustion. The battle had been long and grueling, but she had emerged victorious. Richard's empire had crumbled, and she had played a pivotal role in taking him down. However, as the dust settled, Emily realized that this victory was not just about exposing a corrupt boss. It was about rediscovering herself. The weight that had burdened her for so long had finally been lifted, but there was no sense of immediate relief. Instead, Emily found herself standing at a crossroads, uncertain of what came next. The restaurant was now in a state of transition, and the employees, many of whom had been afraid of Richard for so long, were now wondering what their future would hold. Some feared that the new management would be just as ruthless, while others saw this as an opportunity for change. Emily knew that the future of the restaurant, and the future of its employees, was in her hands. She had the chance to create a new culture, one where employees were treated with respect, and where the toxic environment created by Richard would no longer thrive. But Emily also knew that change wouldn't come overnight. The restaurant was still reeling from the aftermath of Richard's leadership, and it would take time to rebuild trust among the staff. The employees had been through a lot, and many of them were hesitant to believe that things could truly improve. Emily understood their skepticism, but she was determined to prove them wrong. She started by reaching out to her colleagues, speaking with them individually to get a sense of their concerns and ideas for the future. She wanted to make sure that everyone had a voice in the changes that were coming. Emily made it clear that the restaurant's success would no longer be defined by long hours and endless demands, but by creating an environment where employees could thrive. Slowly but surely, she began to implement changes. She introduced new policies that prioritized employee well-being, including more flexible scheduling and fair compensation for overtime. She also worked to establish a clear line of communication between the management and staff, ensuring that everyone felt heard and valued. It wasn't an easy task. There were still skeptics among the staff, those who couldn't quite shake the fear that things would revert back to the way they had been under Richard. But Emily was patient. She knew that trust had to be earned, not given freely. She spent long hours working with her team, showing them through her actions that she was committed to their success. As the weeks passed, Emily saw the first signs of change. The atmosphere in the restaurant began to shift. Employees started to smile more, to work together as a team rather than as individuals trying to survive in a toxic environment. The energy was different, positive, collaborative, and supportive. It was everything Emily had hoped for, but she knew that this was just the beginning. The true test would come when the restaurant faced its first real challenge without Richard's influence. As fate would have it, that challenge came sooner than expected. A major health inspection was scheduled, and the pressure was on to ensure that the restaurant passed with flying colors. In the past, Richard had always handled these inspections with a heavy hand, pushing employees to work harder and faster, regardless of the toll it took on them. But now, it was Emily's turn to lead. She knew that this would be a pivotal moment, not just for her, but for the future of the restaurant. She gathered her team, explained the importance of the inspection, and emphasized that they would face this challenge together. This time, it wouldn't be about cutting corners or pushing people to their breaking point. It would be about working together as a team, supporting one another, and doing things the right way. The day of the inspection arrived, and Emily stood at the front of the restaurant, watching her team prepare. There was a sense of calm in the air. No frantic scrambling, no panicked whispers. The team was working in unison, each person focused on doing their job to the best of their ability. When the inspector arrived, Emily greeted them with confidence. She knew that she had nothing to hide. The restaurant had been cleaned and prepared with care, and the staff was ready to show that they could meet the highest standards of quality and service. The inspection went smoothly, and when the results came in, Emily's team had passed with flying colors. It was a moment of triumph, not just for Emily, but for the entire restaurant. They had done it. They had overcome the toxic legacy of Richard's leadership and proved that they were capable of so much more. As Emily looked around at her team, she realized that this victory was about more than just a successful inspection. It was a testament to the strength and resilience of the people who had fought alongside her. The restaurant was no longer a place of fear and manipulation. It had become a place where people worked together, supported one another, and took pride in what they did. Emily had turned a place of oppression into a place of opportunity. She had rebuilt the restaurant's culture from the ground up, and in doing so, she had rebuilt herself. Emily knew that there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt confident in her ability to face them. She had proven that one person, standing up for what was right, could change everything. And that, more than anything, was the true victory. As Emily looked around at the thriving restaurant, she felt a deep sense of pride. The last few months had been a whirlwind of change, filled with challenges and obstacles, but now she saw the results of her hard work. The atmosphere had completely transformed. No longer did the employees walk around with their heads down, fearful of Richard's wrath. Now, they worked with a sense of purpose, pride, and camaraderie. The team was stronger than ever. Emily had rebuilt the culture of the restaurant from the ground up, and it was thriving. But as things seemed to settle into a new normal, Emily knew that there was still work to be done. The restaurant was doing well, yes, but it had to keep improving. She couldn't afford to become complacent. The restaurant's success, and her own, depended on maintaining the momentum they had worked so hard to achieve. She knew the real challenge was keeping the spirit of collaboration alive, even when things got difficult. As the weeks passed, Emily continued to meet with her team. She wanted to ensure that they felt heard and that their concerns were addressed. She knew that open communication was key to maintaining the positive culture she had worked so hard to create. Emily also began to take a closer look at the financial side of the restaurant. Under Richard's management, many of the restaurant's practices had been inefficient, and some of the staff had been underpaid or overworked. Emily began to implement a fair pay structure, ensuring that employees were compensated fairly for their time and effort. She also worked on creating a system to track hours worked more accurately and introduced a more flexible scheduling system. Slowly, the financial health of the restaurant began to improve. The team felt more appreciated, and their performance reflected that. But just as Emily was feeling like she had things under control, a new challenge arose. A rival restaurant in the area had recently hired a new chef, and their business was booming. It wasn't long before Emily realized that the competition was fierce, and if the restaurant didn't keep up, it could lose its edge. Emily knew that the restaurant had to evolve to stay ahead of the competition. She decided to revamp the menu, introducing new dishes while keeping the core offerings that customers loved. She also focused on improving the restaurant's marketing. Emily had learned a lot about the industry during her time working with Richard, but now she had the freedom to make the decisions that she believed were right. She worked with a small team to create social media campaigns, offering promotions and special events to bring in new customers. The restaurant's reputation grew, and word of mouth spread. The team was excited about the changes and rallied together to support Emily's vision. The restaurant wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving. But as the competition heated up, Emily realized that there was still much to learn. She attended workshops and sought advice from other successful restaurant owners. She wanted to keep growing, keep evolving. Emily knew that the key to long-term success was staying ahead of the curve. Over time, the restaurant's success became undeniable. The food was consistently excellent, the staff was motivated and happy, and the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. The restaurant had become a staple in the community, a place where customers felt like they were part of something special. Emily had turned the restaurant into a thriving business, but she had also created a family of employees who trusted and respected her. The challenge now was to ensure that the restaurant continued to grow and adapt in an ever-changing market. Emily realized that her journey wasn't just about turning the restaurant around. It was about growth, for both the business and herself. She had learned to trust her instincts, to make tough decisions, and to lead with empathy. Her transformation had been just as profound as the restaurant's. It had been a long road, but Emily was proud of how far she had come. She had gone from being a struggling waitress, trapped in a toxic work environment, to becoming a strong and confident leader. And now, as the restaurant continued to thrive, Emily knew that the future was bright. She was ready for whatever came next. The lessons she had learned along the way had shaped her into someone capable of facing any challenge head-on. Emily was no longer just a waitress. She was the heart and soul of the restaurant, and she was ready to keep building on the foundation she had created. As the months passed, Emily had finally found a rhythm. The restaurant was thriving, the team was motivated, and the community had embraced the changes. It seemed like everything was falling into place. But just as Emily felt the weight of the challenges lifting, a new wave of pressure arrived. A corporate chain restaurant, with deep pockets and a well-known brand, was planning to open a location just a few blocks down from her restaurant. The news hit the local community hard. The competition was fierce, and for the first time in months, Emily felt a sense of uncertainty. Her restaurant had become a staple in the community, a beloved spot known for its authentic food and warm atmosphere. But could it compete with the resources of a large chain? Emily knew this was a make-or-break moment. She couldn't afford to lose the hard-earned momentum she had built. The stakes had never been higher. She gathered her team together and called for a meeting. They all sat in the small break room, the weight of the situation hanging over them. Emily could see the concern on their faces. The idea of going up against a giant like the corporate chain was daunting, but Emily knew she couldn't let fear dictate their next move. She needed a strategy, one that would capitalize on everything that made their restaurant unique. "We've worked too hard to let this chain take what we've built," Emily began, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We're not going to beat them by trying to match them dollar for dollar. We're going to beat them by being the place people can't get anywhere else. We're going to focus on what we do best." The team looked at her, their skepticism fading. Emily had always been able to inspire them, but this was different. They were facing a true threat. Still, her confidence made them believe in the possibility of success. Emily's plan was simple but ambitious. She knew the chain would have the budget to push massive advertising campaigns, but she also knew that money couldn't buy loyalty or community trust. Their restaurant had the advantage of being a local gem, loved by the neighborhood for its authenticity, service, and atmosphere. The key would be to double down on those strengths. Emily focused on 4 areas: community engagement, loyalty programs, marketing, and quality. The first step was to deepen their connection with the local community. Emily personally reached out to local businesses, arranging partnerships for cross-promotion. They hosted charity events, cooking classes, and community nights where families could come and enjoy a meal together. The restaurant became more than just a place to eat. It became a cornerstone of the community. The second part of her plan was a customer loyalty program. Emily introduced a point-based system where customers could earn rewards for frequent visits and referrals. She also launched an exclusive VIP club for regulars, offering them special discounts and early access to new menu items. This created a sense of belonging among the restaurant's most dedicated customers, making them feel appreciated and valued. For marketing, Emily knew they couldn't compete with the chain's advertising budget, but she also understood the power of social media. She tasked her team with actively posting on Instagram and Facebook, sharing behind-the-scenes footage, customer stories, and promotions. Emily herself became a more visible presence online, sharing her journey and the restaurant's mission. Their social media following grew rapidly, and soon, they were trending in the local area, with people sharing their experiences and encouraging others to visit. Quality was always the foundation of Emily's vision, and she made sure it remained at the forefront. She worked closely with the kitchen team to refine the menu, keeping the dishes that customers loved while introducing new, innovative items that added a fresh twist. The goal was to always surprise and delight the customers, to keep them coming back for more. The combination of these efforts began to pay off. The restaurant's loyal customer base grew stronger, and word of mouth spread far beyond what Emily had anticipated. People weren't just coming for the food. They were coming for the experience, the feeling of being part of something special. Emily's confidence in her team and the restaurant's mission was unwavering. As the chain restaurant opened its doors, she knew they had a unique advantage. The corporate entity could never replicate the warmth, community spirit, and authenticity that her restaurant had cultivated over the years. The competition would always be there, but Emily had learned that success wasn't about being the biggest or the richest. It was about being the best in the eyes of the people you served. The first few months after the chain opened were telling. Despite the large budget the new restaurant had, it struggled to connect with the local community. Customers weren't coming back for the cookie-cutter experience it offered. Meanwhile, Emily's restaurant continued to grow, attracting new faces and reinforcing the loyalty of their regulars. In the end, Emily's restaurant not only survived the competition, it thrived. The experience taught her a valuable lesson. In business, as in life, the key to overcoming obstacles isn't always about competing head-to-head. Sometimes, it's about staying true to your values, building strong relationships, and focusing on what makes you unique. As the months passed, the corporate chain closed its doors, unable to maintain the customer base it had hoped for. Emily's restaurant, however, had solidified its place as a beloved local institution. Looking around at her team, Emily smiled. They had done it. They had faced the challenge together, and now, they were stronger than ever. She had taken the restaurant from the brink of defeat to a thriving, successful business. But she knew this was only one chapter in her ongoing journey. The future was full of opportunities, and Emily was ready to keep pushing forward, confident in her ability to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the months passed, Emily's confidence grew, and so did the reputation of her restaurant. With the corporate chain long gone, the local community had firmly embraced the changes Emily had made, and business was thriving. She had transformed the restaurant from a struggling, toxic environment under Richard's rule into a beacon of success, both for her team and for the neighborhood. But success came with its own set of challenges. Emily had built a strong foundation, but she knew she couldn't let her guard down. The restaurant business was always evolving, and she had to keep up. She had already shown her resilience, but now she had to prove she could sustain this success in the long term. The first major test came when Emily realized the restaurant's growing success was beginning to outpace the current staff and infrastructure. They had reached a point where the kitchen was consistently overrun during peak hours, and the service staff, though dedicated, was stretched thin. Emily knew that in order to keep delivering the same high-quality experience, she would need to expand both her team and her space. The thought of hiring more people brought a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had built a strong, tight-knit team that worked well together, and the idea of bringing in new employees was a bit daunting. Would they mesh with the existing staff? Would they share the same vision and commitment to customer service? But Emily knew she couldn't do it all alone. The demand for the restaurant's food was only growing, and if they didn't scale up, they risked burning out their team and losing the quality that had made them so successful. She also realized that keeping the restaurant's atmosphere intimate and welcoming was vital to the experience. With this in mind, she decided to start by hiring a few key positions, people who could help alleviate the stress on her current staff without overwhelming the restaurant. First on the list was a sous chef, someone who could take the pressure off the kitchen during busy shifts. Emily reached out to a local culinary school and found someone with both the experience and the passion for food that matched her restaurant standards. The new hire immediately clicked with the kitchen team, and Emily could see the relief in their faces as the workload became more manageable. Next, she brought in a front-of-house manager. This was perhaps the most crucial position. The person would need to maintain the positive energy of the restaurant, keep morale high, and ensure that the guests felt the same warmth and attentiveness they always had. After several interviews, Emily found the right person, someone who was experienced, professional, and shared her vision for creating a positive work environment. It wasn't long before the new manager's presence helped smooth over the remaining rough patches, and Emily was able to focus more on the bigger picture. With the staff growing and the restaurant running smoothly, Emily turned her attention to one of the most important aspects of her business, the future. She had proven she could overcome challenges, but now it was time to plan for the long term. Emily knew she had the drive and creativity to keep pushing forward, but she also understood the importance of sustainability. The restaurant's success was rooted in a philosophy that valued quality over quantity, customer experience over speed, and teamwork over individual accolades. The challenge was to continue upholding those values as the business grew. Emily decided to start looking at expansion opportunities. She didn't want to rush into opening another location, but she saw the potential to spread her restaurant's philosophy to other neighborhoods in the city. It would be a big risk. Expansion could stretch her resources thin and compromise the core values she had worked so hard to instill. But she also saw the possibility of introducing her restaurant's unique culture to new communities, offering them a taste of what it made her restaurant so successful. She reached out to a mentor, an experienced restaurant owner who had successfully expanded his own business. They sat down together and discussed the pros and cons of expansion, as well as the key strategies for scaling up without losing the essence of the brand. Emily's mentor gave her valuable insights into the challenges she would face: staffing, consistency, and maintaining quality, while encouraging her to trust her instincts and her ability to build something special. Armed with new knowledge and a clearer vision, Emily began exploring potential locations for a second restaurant. She was careful not to jump at the first opportunity. She wanted to find a place that matched the values of her first restaurant, a community-oriented neighborhood with a similar demographic. It wasn't an easy decision. The risk was high, and there was always the fear of losing what she had worked so hard to build. But Emily knew that without taking calculated risks, growth would remain out of reach. After months of research and planning, Emily found a location she felt confident about. It wasn't just about the space, it was about the community. The area was thriving, with a growing appreciation for local businesses, and it seemed like the perfect fit for her restaurant. Emily made the decision to move forward with opening the second location, but she did so cautiously, ensuring that the foundation of the original restaurant was strong enough to support the expansion. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity as Emily worked to get the new restaurant up and running. She hired a team, trained them to match the culture and standards of the original location, and oversaw every detail, from the layout to the menu. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and challenges along the way, but Emily remained focused, determined to ensure the new restaurant would succeed. Finally, the day came when the second location opened its doors. Emily stood in the front of the restaurant, taking it all in. It was another beginning, another challenge, but she felt ready. She had built something special in her first location, and now it was time to do it again. As the doors opened and the first customers walked in, Emily smiled. The journey was far from over, but she knew that with her team by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. As the second restaurant began to take off, Emily found herself caught in a whirlwind of excitement and pressure. The launch had gone smoothly, and the community had embraced it just as they had the first location. However, Emily quickly realized that managing two successful restaurants was no small feat. The demands of running one location had been challenging enough, but now, with two businesses to oversee, the pressure was starting to mount. She couldn't afford to let either restaurant slip, but she was beginning to feel stretched thin. Emily had always been hands-on, managing both the operations and the culture of the restaurant herself. But now, with a larger staff and the growing complexity of the business, she knew she had to adjust her approach if she was going to keep both restaurants running smoothly. The first challenge was delegating. Emily had never been one to let go of control easily, but she knew that in order to maintain the quality and consistency of her brand, she needed to trust her managers. She had hired experienced staff at both locations, but it was still difficult to step back and allow them to take charge. She began to realize that the more responsibilities she handed off, the more room she had to focus on growing the business in other ways. Still, Emily couldn't help but feel anxious about the idea of losing control. She decided to spend time at both restaurants, visiting each one regularly to ensure everything was up to her standards. She met with her managers and team leaders to discuss new ideas and gather feedback. This helped her maintain a presence at both locations while still empowering her team to take on more responsibility. Over time, Emily began to see the benefits of her efforts. Her managers grew more confident in their roles, and the staff became more independent. Emily no longer had to oversee every small detail. She could trust her team to make decisions and solve problems on their own, freeing her up to focus on the bigger picture. But even as things began to settle into a rhythm, Emily faced new challenges. One evening, just a few months after the second restaurant's opening, Emily received a call from her head chef at the original location. The kitchen had experienced a major setback. A piece of equipment had broken down during the dinner rush, causing delays in service. The team was scrambling, and the kitchen was in chaos. Emily's heart sank. She knew that this was one of those critical moments that could either make or break the restaurant's reputation. She immediately left the second location and rushed to the original restaurant, hoping to get things back on track. When she arrived, she saw the tension in the kitchen. The staff was doing their best to keep up, but it was clear that the breakdown had thrown everything off. Emily took a deep breath, walked into the kitchen, and began working alongside her team. She reassured them, calmly directing the staff and helping to get the broken equipment temporarily fixed. Emily knew this wasn't the first time her team had faced adversity, and she knew that if they stuck together, they could get through it. The service was delayed, but the team pulled together and managed to finish the night strong. Despite the setback, the customers were understanding, and the restaurant still received great reviews. The experience reminded Emily of something important. No matter how far she had come, she couldn't take anything for granted. There would always be challenges, but it was how she and her team responded to them that would define their success. In the weeks that followed, Emily began to reassess the way she handled crises. She realized that while she had done an excellent job of creating a positive culture and delegating responsibility, she needed to ensure her teams were better prepared for emergencies. She started implementing regular training sessions for her staff, focusing on problem-solving, communication, and teamwork. She also invested in upgrading the equipment to minimize the risk of future breakdowns. Emily knew that she couldn't prevent every setback, but she could certainly prepare her team to handle whatever came their way. The next challenge came when a well-known food critic visited one of the locations. Emily had always prided herself on the quality of her food, but the pressure of a critical review weighed heavily on her. She spent days anxiously awaiting the critic's feedback, constantly checking her emails and wondering what the review would say. When the review finally came in, Emily opened it with trembling hands. To her relief, the critic praised the restaurant's food, atmosphere, and service. The review was glowing, and it helped bring in a wave of new customers. The experience was a reminder of how fragile success could be. One bad review could impact the business, but one good review could open doors to new opportunities. Emily knew she had to continue delivering exceptional service and quality every day, not just for the critics, but for the customers who trusted her restaurant with their time and money. As the months went by, Emily continued to grow both personally and professionally. She was no longer just the owner of a successful restaurant. She had become a leader who inspired her team, a mentor who helped others grow, and a businesswoman who understood the importance of balancing creativity with strategy. She had built a brand that was rooted in authenticity and community, and she had done it with the support of a dedicated team. Emily's story wasn't just about overcoming obstacles. It was about the resilience to face the unknown and the courage to keep moving forward, no matter how many challenges arose. Looking ahead, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that there would always be ups and downs, but with the foundation she had built, she was ready to face whatever the future held. The journey was far from over, but she was more confident than ever that she had the strength to lead her team through whatever came next. Months passed, and Emily's restaurants continued to thrive. The second location had settled into a comfortable rhythm, and the team at both restaurants was working like a well-oiled machine. Emily's confidence had grown, and so had her understanding of the delicate balance required to run multiple businesses. But as the pressure of managing two successful restaurants began to ease, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had built a successful business, but now she realized that the true test was not just about running a profitable operation. It was about leaving a lasting legacy. Emily had always dreamed of something bigger, something that went beyond just good food and great service. She wanted to make a meaningful impact on the community, to be remembered not just for her restaurants, but for her contribution to the people she served. One day, as Emily was walking through the neighborhood where her original restaurant was located, she noticed a small, run-down building that had been sitting empty for months. The space was right on the corner, with high-foot traffic and a great view of the street. Emily couldn't help but feel drawn to it. She walked past it several times over the next few weeks, imagining what it could be. She knew that it could be the perfect place for a new venture, one that would further cement her role as a community leader. Emily began to dream of a new project, one that was not just another restaurant, but a community hub. She envisioned a space where people could gather, learn, and connect over food, where the community could come together to share stories, knowledge, and experiences. It was more than just a place to eat. It would be a place where relationships could be built and strengthened. The idea was risky. A new venture meant new challenges, and this one was even more uncertain than opening a second restaurant. But Emily was driven by a sense of purpose. She wasn't just interested in business success anymore. She wanted to build something that mattered. She spent months planning the new space, collaborating with local artists and educators to create a space that could offer more than just food. She envisioned cooking classes, local art exhibitions, book clubs, and even workshops for aspiring entrepreneurs. It would be a place where people could explore their passions, meet new friends, and learn from one another. Emily poured her heart into the project. She worked tirelessly with architects and designers to transform the old building into something welcoming and inspiring. The renovations were a huge undertaking, but Emily was determined to see it through. She took on the responsibility of running both restaurants while overseeing the new venture, finding herself more and more involved in every aspect of the business. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were times when the weight of managing 3 projects felt overwhelming, and Emily questioned whether she had taken on too much. But every time she doubted herself, she reminded herself of her purpose, to create something meaningful that would enrich the lives of the people around her. After several months of hard work, the new space was ready to open. Emily was nervous but excited. She knew the community had been watching, waiting to see what she would do next. The day of the opening was filled with anticipation. The streets outside were buzzing with energy as people gathered to see what this new venture was all about. Emily stood in the doorway, welcoming the crowd with a smile, her heart racing. As the doors opened, people flooded in, excited to see what had been created. The space was everything Emily had hoped for. It was bright, warm, and full of life. The walls were lined with artwork from local artists, and the atmosphere was buzzing with conversation and laughter. It was clear that this was more than just a business. It was a gathering place, a community center. Over the next few weeks, the space became exactly what Emily had envisioned. The cooking classes were full, the workshops were buzzing with energy, and people from all walks of life came to share their stories and experiences. Emily watched as people connected in ways she hadn't imagined. The community that had supported her restaurants for years was now supporting this new venture, and it was making a real impact on their lives. Emily realized that this was the legacy she had been searching for. It wasn't about expanding her restaurant empire or gaining recognition. It was about creating a space that brought people together and made their lives richer, more fulfilling. She had built something that was truly hers, something that would live on far beyond the restaurants and the food she had served. As the months passed, the community hub continued to grow. Emily received messages from people whose lives had been touched by the space, from aspiring chefs who had found their passion through the cooking classes to individuals who had made lasting friendships at one of the many events. The impact was far greater than she had ever imagined. Emily had achieved what she set out to do. She had built a business that not only thrived, but gave back to the community that had supported her every step of the way. And with each passing day, she felt more connected to the people around her and more at peace with the journey she had taken. As she sat in the newly opened space, watching people laugh and share stories over a meal, Emily smiled. She had found her true calling, and it was more than she had ever hoped for. Emily's community hub had quickly become a central gathering place for the people in the neighborhood. As months passed, the buzz surrounding the space only grew stronger. What started as an idea to create a meaningful legacy had blossomed into something much larger than Emily had initially imagined. The cooking classes were always full, and the workshops on everything from entrepreneurship to photography drew crowds every week. Local artists showcased their work in the gallery space, and the book clubs, charity events, and open mic nights fostered a sense of connection that Emily hadn't anticipated. It was everything she had hoped for. Still, as the success of the hub continued to build, Emily found herself reflecting on her journey. She had come a long way from the days of being a waitress, battling a toxic work environment, and taking a risk to open her first restaurant. Now, she was the owner of 2 successful restaurants and a thriving community space that had brought people together in ways she never expected. But with success came new challenges. Emily had always been the one to do everything herself, from running the kitchen to managing the front of house. But she now had to delegate even more. The demand for space at the hub was growing, and as the restaurant business continued to thrive, Emily was finding herself spread thinner than ever before. She had an incredible team at both restaurants and at the hub, but the challenge of balancing everything while maintaining the level of quality and personal touch that had made her businesses successful was beginning to take its toll. Emily knew she had to rethink her approach to leadership. She couldn't do it all alone anymore, and if she wanted to continue growing her businesses, she would need to empower others to take ownership of different aspects of the operations. The first step was to focus on her leadership team. She had always promoted from within, hiring people who shared her values and vision for the business, and it was time to invest in their growth. Emily started by sending her key managers to leadership training programs, helping them develop skills that would make them better leaders in their own right. She encouraged them to think creatively and take more responsibility, making it clear that she trusted them to uphold the standards of the business. Over time, Emily noticed the difference. Her managers stepped up, making decisions with confidence and solving problems before they even reached her. The staff at both the restaurant and the hub began to take more initiative, and the businesses continued to thrive. Emily was no longer caught in the weeds of day-to-day operations. She had become the visionary leader, setting the direction for the business and trusting her team to bring that vision to life. But as the leadership of the businesses began to shift, Emily also had to confront her own evolving role. She had built the businesses from the ground up, and her identity was tied to them. Letting go of control had been difficult, but Emily realized that this was a necessary step in her personal growth. She needed to step away from the day-to-day operations if she wanted to focus on her true passion, community development. The success of the hub had ignited a new fire in her. She wanted to expand this vision of bringing people together and creating spaces for connection. Emily began looking for ways to replicate the community hub model in other neighborhoods, reaching more people who would benefit from a space like hers. She saw the potential to create a network of community spaces that weren't just about food, but about fostering creativity, learning, and connection. The idea excited her, but it also intimidated her. Expanding meant a lot of unknowns, from securing funding to finding the right locations and teams. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy, but her experience with the restaurant and the hub had taught her how to navigate obstacles, and she was ready to take on the challenge. As she began planning for expansion, Emily reached out to her mentors and advisors, seeking advice from people who had successfully scaled businesses. She wanted to learn from their experiences and avoid the mistakes they had made. She also spoke with her leadership team, gathering their thoughts on the expansion and how they could contribute to the vision. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and it was clear that her team was ready to support her in this next step. Emily spent the next few months carefully planning the future of her businesses. She began identifying potential locations for new community hubs, securing partnerships with local organizations, and building a network of supporters who were excited about the concept. The more she spoke to people about her vision, the more she realized that this wasn't just her dream, it was a dream that others shared. Emily was inspired by the way the community had embraced the hub, and she was driven to take it further. As she prepared to take the first steps toward expansion, Emily felt a sense of excitement that had been absent from her life for some time. She had built something extraordinary, and now she was ready to share it with the world. Looking back on her journey, Emily couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. She had faced adversity, taken risks, and grown in ways she never imagined. And now, she was on the cusp of something even bigger. With her team by her side, Emily was ready to build a legacy that went beyond restaurants, a legacy that would touch the lives of people and communities all over the city and beyond. Months into the expansion process, Emily found herself more focused than ever. The vision she had for the community hubs was growing, and the plans were slowly taking shape. The success of her original space, where creativity and community flourished, had paved the way for what was now a network of vibrant places that supported not just food, but education, art, and connection. However, the journey toward scaling up wasn't as smooth as it seemed from the outside. As Emily moved forward, she faced challenges that tested her resilience in ways she hadn't anticipated. The process of finding the right locations for the new hubs proved more difficult than she imagined. There were numerous setbacks. Property owners were hesitant, the leasing agreements were complex, and the competition for prime locations was fierce. Every time Emily thought she had found the perfect spot, something fell through. There were moments when she felt defeated. She questioned if the expansion was the right move, wondering if she was pushing too fast and taking too much on her plate. But every time she felt the weight of doubt, she remembered why she started this journey in the first place, to create something meaningful that brought people together. It was this belief that kept her going. As the months dragged on, she adjusted her approach. Emily realized that, instead of trying to rush things, she needed to be patient. This wasn't about expanding for the sake of expansion. It was about ensuring that each new space could truly embody the same values that had made the first community hub such a success. She worked tirelessly to build relationships with local leaders and businesses in potential neighborhoods. She focused on understanding the needs of the community before making any decisions. Emily also spent a lot of time listening to her team, who were just as invested in the vision as she was. Together, they brainstormed ideas on how to make the hubs even more interactive and accessible to the people they served. She knew that no one person could do this alone, so she trusted her team to come up with creative solutions. The breakthrough finally came when Emily found a property in an up-and-coming neighborhood, a space that was imperfect at first glance but had incredible potential. The building was older, with a lot of character but also a lot of work to be done. It wasn't the flashiest location, but it had the community feel Emily was looking for. It was just the kind of place that would attract the kind of people who wanted to make a difference. Emily signed the lease, and work on the space began almost immediately. The construction was grueling, but Emily felt more energized than ever. She poured herself into the project, getting involved in the design, meeting with the architects, and ensuring that the space would have the right atmosphere. This was the beginning of something new, and she wanted to get it right. At the same time, Emily continued to oversee both of her existing restaurants and the original community hub. The balance between overseeing multiple projects was exhausting, but Emily had learned how to delegate and trust her managers. She knew that, with the right people in place, she didn't have to handle everything on her own. Her leadership had become more about empowerment than control. As the new space started to take shape, Emily's excitement grew. The design featured open areas for events and classes, with walls made of reclaimed wood and local artwork hanging throughout. She created a small cafe area where people could gather over coffee or a meal, and there was even a space for a community garden. It was everything she had envisioned, and more. The grand opening was set for early summer, and Emily couldn't wait to share the new space with the community. However, as opening day drew closer, Emily started to feel the weight of expectation. This was the moment when everything would come together, but what if it didn't? What if the community didn't embrace this new space the way they had the first one? Emily knew that. With this expansion, there was more at stake. She had invested so much time, energy, and emotion into this project that the thought of it failing felt overwhelming. But as she stood in the space on the eve of the grand opening, she took a deep breath and reminded herself of the journey she had already been through. She had faced doubts, setbacks, and failures before, and each time, she had pushed through. The next day, as the doors opened and the first guests walked in, Emily watched with pride as the space began to fill with people. It was everything she had hoped for: families, artists, entrepreneurs, and neighbors coming together to connect, learn, and share. The energy was electric. There were workshops taking place, people enjoying meals together, and conversations happening everywhere. It was clear that Emily had succeeded in creating a space that not only served food, but also fostered relationships and creativity. As the evening came to a close, Emily stood in the middle of the room, taking it all in. She realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. The community hub had now expanded into a second space, and with it, the potential to reach even more people. Emily had faced challenges, doubts, and fears along the way, but she had never given up. She had built something that was making a real difference, and it was only the start of something much bigger. Looking around at the people enjoying the space she had created, Emily knew that she had found her true calling. She had built a legacy of connection, collaboration, and community, and there was no turning back now. She was more determined than ever to continue expanding this vision, one space at a time. As Emily watched the doors of the second community hub swing open for the first time, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just the excitement of expanding her vision. It was the realization that this was the culmination of everything she had worked for. From the first moments of struggle, to the times when doubts crept in, to now, watching the room fill with people who were as eager to connect as she had once been, Emily understood that her journey had come full circle. The challenges were far from over. With the second hub now open, Emily's attention had to shift again. Running 2 restaurants and now multiple community hubs demanded constant innovation, management, and leadership. The demands on her time had only grown, but Emily had learned the importance of delegation and empowering her team. She had learned that building something sustainable didn't mean doing everything herself. It meant surrounding herself with people who shared her passion, vision, and dedication. Emily continued to invest in her team, from the restaurant staff to the managers of the community spaces. She sent them to workshops, provided leadership training, and created opportunities for growth. She knew that her success was built on the collective effort of everyone around her, and by helping them thrive, she could ensure the continued success of her ventures. But beyond the day-to-day operations, Emily also had a larger vision for the future. She wasn't just focused on growth for growth's sake. Emily wanted to create a ripple effect, where the spaces she had built could inspire others to create similar environments in their own communities. She began to see the potential for a movement, a network of community hubs that could spread across cities, empowering people, supporting local businesses, and building stronger neighborhoods. It wasn't just about the food anymore, though that was always a core element. It was about the relationships, the education, and the connections that happened over a shared meal or at a community event. She had created something that transcended the walls of her restaurants. As she continued to build on this vision, Emily encountered new challenges. The competition was always there, and as her reputation grew, so did the pressure to maintain high standards. But this time, Emily faced it with confidence. She had been through the worst, the hardships, the betrayals, the uncertainty. Now, she was focused on the bigger picture, on leaving a legacy that would impact not just the people she served, but the future of her industry. Emily's path was no longer defined by overcoming obstacles for the sake of survival. She had reached a point where the challenges she faced were not obstacles to her success, but stepping stones to something even bigger. The restaurant business and the community spaces she had built had become her life's work. Looking around at the thriving spaces, at the smiling faces, at the conversations happening all around her, Emily knew that she had created something lasting. This wasn't just a business, it was a movement. She had built a place where people could come together, learn, grow, and support one another. And that, more than anything, was the true success. The community hubs were thriving, but Emily's focus remained on the people. Her journey had started with a simple desire to create a better life for herself, but it had evolved into something far greater, a vision for a better community. As the hubs continued to grow, Emily expanded her reach. She began working with nonprofit organizations, local schools, and other community leaders to create even more spaces for connection and education. She used her platform to support causes she believed in, from youth mentorship programs to local sustainability efforts. Emily knew that the impact she had started in her own restaurants and hubs could be scaled, that it could touch even more lives. Her vision wasn't just about expansion. It was about creating a foundation of support, an environment where people felt safe, heard, and empowered. She had built something that was greater than herself, and that was the true mark of her success. As she looked back at how far she had come, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had taken risks, faced setbacks, and overcome doubt. She had built not just businesses, but communities. And in the end, that was the legacy she would leave behind, a legacy of connection, of hope, and of the belief that through collaboration and community, anything was possible.